Iran, called Persia until 1935, a nation of great antiquity and Oriental culture, today occupies a strategic position in the free world's chain of defense against communist aggression. Located under the shadow of the Soviet giant to the north, it is the geographic keystone of CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization. This free world alliance consists of Iran, Turkey, Pakistan, and Great Britain, with the United States as an active observer and contributor. Now it is April 1964, and Iran is the setting for Exercise Delawar, which is the Persian word for courage. Purpose of the exercise is to demonstrate the capability of the United States to move swiftly to the aid of Iran and to provide training in combined operations with Iranian forces. Iran's history can be traced back thousands of years. The greatness of the Persian civilization is vividly recalled by Susa, legendary site of the prophet Daniel's tomb, and mighty Persepolis, built by Darius the Great and his son Xerxes. Today, Iran is a land of contrasts, with ancient traditions giving way to 20th century modernization. A land of beautiful cities with many fine parks, it is a constitutional monarchy headed by His Imperial Majesty Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. Firmly committed to democratic ideals, the Shah has launched his country on a broad program of industrialization, dramatically illustrated by this huge new dam, the largest in the Middle East. Halfway around the world in the state of Florida, U.S. participation in Exercise Delawar is the responsibility of the United States Strike Command, with headquarters at MacDill Air Force Base. Among its many responsibilities, Strike Command is charged by the Joint Chiefs of Staff with all U.S. military activities in the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa south of the Sahara. Strike Command operations are carried out by a joint staff composed of United States Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps officers. In Exercise Delawar, a joint task force is established with combat units drawn from all the military services under the operational control of a joint task force commander. For exercise purposes, Iran is divided into two fictitious nations: Freeland, a member of CENTO, and Sunland, the aggressor. When invaded by Sunland, Freeland calls for military assistance. In response, the United States agrees to send Joint Task Force Delawar to bolster Freeland defenses. The operation plan for Exercise Delawar calls for a joint task force operating directly under the Commander-in-Chief, United States Strike Command, to be deployed to Iran by air and sea. The joint task force will include the following combat elements: an Army Airborne Brigade of 2 parachute battalions, 2 Air Force F-100 fighter squadrons, plus an airlift force, and a Navy force consisting of 2 destroyers, a reinforced Marine Rifle Company, and amphibious support craft. The headquarters of Joint Task Force Delawar will fly from MacDill Air Force Base to Bağdati Air Force Base in Iran, stopping en route at Incirlik Air Base in Turkey to leave a detachment at the staging area there. Two U.S. fighter squadrons will fly from Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico to Bağdati. The Army Brigade will deploy by air from Fort Campbell, Kentucky to a staging base at Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. The Navy and Marine Force will assemble in the Persian Gulf. On D-Day, the Army Brigade will take off from its staging area at Incirlik. Flying through the narrow mountainous corridor that marks the air route between Turkey and northwest Iran, the Airborne Brigade will conduct a parachute assault near Despol, Iran. Also on D-Day, the Navy force will conduct an amphibious assault on Kharg Island in the Persian Gulf. The airborne and amphibious assaults will be supported by the fighters based at Badati. The deployment timetable is carried out with minute precision. First to depart is the Joint Task Force headquarters, which loads aboard a giant C-135 jet transport at MacDill Air Force Base. The JTF staff is composed of officers and men assigned to headquarters, United States Strike Command. Along with them in C-130 turboprop aircraft go men and equipment of Strikecom's communications support element, indispensable for controlling and coordinating the widely dispersed forces participating in Exercise Delawar. Simultaneously at Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, F-100 fighter pilots receive their final briefing for the 9,000-mile flight to Iran. Before taking off on the long flight, the F-100s are given a thorough going over by maintenance crews who bring the planes up to top-notch fighting conditions. Equipment and supplies are checked and loaded aboard C-130s. Maintenance personnel fly with their equipment to be on hand to service the first planes to arrive in Iran. First to take off are the C-130s carrying maintenance and communications equipment. Then come the powerful F-100s, reliable mainstay of the Tactical Air Command. Armed with machine guns and rockets, they can also carry conventional or nuclear bombs. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division, colorfully nicknamed the Screaming Eagles during World War II. Departure time for the Airborne Brigade. 560 tons of equipment are loaded aboard the giant aircraft. (2,300 combat-equipped airborne troopers in plane for the 9,000-mile flight. Their destination is the staging area at Incirlik Air Base, Turkey. The transport planes, a total of 71, are provided by MATS, the Military Air Transport Service. These aircraft make stops to refuel en route. The F-100s are given their second wind by KC-135 tankers of the Strategic Air Command. In Iran, Exercise Delawar's nerve center is Badati Air Base. Among the first to land at Badati are elements of the Joint Task Force staff, who will prepare for the arrival of the forces en route from the United States. Communications equipment and personnel also arrive on these aircraft. Technicians of the communications support element are among the first to become operational, setting up their gear with the speed and skill that come only from long hours of training. The first combat elements to arrive in Iran are the F-100s, which land at Vadati with routine precision despite blowing dust that hampers visibility. Senior U.S. and Iranian Air Force officers are on hand to observe as C-130s land with Air Force equipment and maintenance personnel. South of Vadati in the Persian Gulf, U.S. Navy forces assemble off Kharg Island. This is Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, staging area for the Army Airborne Brigade. While the transport planes are fine-tuned to combat readiness by Air Force personnel, the paratroopers undergo intensive physical conditioning and refresher training after their long flight from Fort Campbell. There is also time to relax. And there is time to nourish the inner man. Now it's time to get ready for the flight to Iran and the airborne assault. Meanwhile in Iran, paratroopers of the Imperial Iranian Army prepare for a final practice jump. U.S. advisors double-check equipment before the Iranians load on for the drop. Iranian flight crews and airborne officers go over the operation plan and pinpoint the drop zone. The jump, made near Tehran, is completed without injury. The confidence and skill of these men testify to their qualifications as paratroopers and reflect the excellent training given them by U.S. Army advisors. Later, a critique is held by Iranian and U.S. officers. The paratroopers are asked if the jump was a good one. They shout back, "Bali Bali," meaning yes indeed. Back at Incirlik in Turkey, the U.S. airborne troops make a night takeoff for the 1,000-mile trip to the objective area in Iran. At Vadati Air Force Base, the Shah of Iran and his military staff arrive by plane to observe the airborne assault. From the air base, he is driven to the drop zone. At the drop zone, His Majesty joins other military and civic dignitaries of the CENTO nations assembled to observe the parachute assault. The Shah personally greets his visitors before mounting the reviewing stand to observe this phase of the exercise. At dawn on D-Day, after a 1,000-mile night flight over snow-capped mountains, the U.S. Airborne Force arrives over the drop zone at the appointed moment. The heavy equipment is dropped first. Then come the Screaming Eagles, 1,500 strong. After securing their equipment, the troopers assemble. They quickly move out for a link-up with their Iranian counterparts, who compose the Freeland forces. As the airborne assault is successfully concluded, the Shah leaves the stands to continue his observation of this phase of the exercise. He boards a jeep and heads a convoy of dignitaries to watch the continuing action involving U.S. and Iranian ground troops. Later that morning, Navy forces in the Persian Gulf launch an amphibious attack on the beaches of Kharg Island. Their mission, to clear the island of enemy insurgents. Landing craft hit the beach, and U.S. Marine Corps riflemen storm ashore. Other Marines are airlifted by helicopters in a typical example of Marine vertical envelopment tactics. Use of air vehicles greatly increases tactical mobility and enhances the ability of ground troops to move over terrain obstacles such as beaches, rivers, and mountains. Once again, the Shah is present to observe the action. The Marines quickly move in and seize critical terrain. Completion of the amphibious and airborne assaults marks the end of a phase. The United States Joint Task Force, having officially entered the country in response to Freeland's request for military assistance, now passes command of its units to the Supreme Allied Command. Under this combined chain of command, United States and Iranian soldiers, sailors, and airmen carry out the combined phase of Exercise Delawar. They plan and fight together to drive the aggressor from Freeland. The United States Strike Command stresses mobility, and as a typical example, swift-moving U.S. Army forces rapidly link up with their Iranian counterparts. Together, the combined armies attack across the rugged terrain, advancing toward the fictitious enemy from Sunland. This teamwork in combined operations is emphasized by a second parachute jump by a U.S. airborne company and an Iranian airborne company who are ordered by the Supreme Allied Commander to seize the final objective. The Iranians' performance matches the practiced skill of the U.S. paratroopers. The drive and combat spirit shown by all troops re-emphasize the meaning of the code name for the exercise, Delawar, or courage. At the same time, U.S. and Iranian units operating in the Persian Gulf make a combined amphibious strike against the mainland. Iranian and U.S. naval officers work together in directing the combined operation. In a similar manner, close air support during the exercise is planned by U.S. and Iranian Air Force officers working in close coordination. Here, U.S. F-100s take off in heavy dust for a ground support mission. They are followed by Iranian F-86s. Trained in the United States, the Iranians show themselves to be superb flyers. The Iranian pilots spot their targets and peel off for the attack. Forward air controllers vector the planes in on the target. U.S. Air Force F-100s strafe enemy positions. Upon seizure of the final objective, terminating the exercise, the fighters return to Balati Air Base. U.S. troops and aircraft assemble at Balati for the long trip back to the United States. Redeployment begins at once, for speed is of the essence to the U.S. Strike Command. Despite the unabating dust, the giant planes airlift men and equipment back to the United States safely and on schedule. High-ranking U.S. military officials have devoted considerable effort to evaluating the significance of Exercise Delawar and its contributions to the defense of the free world. They are firm in their belief that the success of the exercise has given a strong boost to the Central Treaty Organization. U.S. and Iranian fighting men have gained invaluable experience in combined operations in the field and in staff and command functions involving ground, air, and naval operations. The combined effort serves as additional proof that differences in language and customs need not be a barrier to allies working and fighting together in a common cause. Moreover, the exercise has provided further evidence that adherence to finely drawn joint operating procedures allows the combat power of Allied forces to be greatly enhanced. Victory in Freeland may be considered a political as well as a military success. As for the United States Strike Command, Exercise Delawar has furnished additional and significant evidence of the effectiveness of the Joint Task Force concept, with its emphasis on teamwork among the Army, Navy, and Air Force. It is another demonstration of Strike Command's readiness to react swiftly to a call for help and to dispatch a strong mobile fighting force to any part of the world in a matter of hours. Victory in Freeland could have been enacted in Southeast Asia, Africa, or Latin America. And finally, it is a warning to would-be aggressors that Strike Command has the capability and determination to live up to its motto, swift tactical reaction in every known environment.